I don't know about you, but I've always admired Romy Millennial, aka Lauren Chen, for one reason, and one reason only. Compared to many women, her application of makeup is supremely masterful. She applies a lot of makeup, to be sure, but it never really looked over the top. So when she presented herself in public, and she's always had makeup on, I always thought to myself that that was a real skill set that she possessed, and I admired her for it. You know, there are plenty of women out there that use way too much makeup, and they do it to cover blemishes, and actually makes them look worse than they would otherwise without it. But Lauren Chen, on the other hand, is so good with makeup, she actually looks better with it. I wanted to put that out there before continuing with the topic of the video. Lauren Chen, in case you don't know who she is, has been a political commentator for a while now, a goodly number of years. And in the last couple of years, she's become extremely right-wing, at least far more so than she used to be. She used to be sort of right of center, and these days you might say she's sort of alt-right or alt-right adjacent. But she's built up a pretty big channel over time. In addition to her channel, Lauren Chen, used to be called Romy Millennial, she had a company called Tenet Media, and a bunch of other things. She used to work for Blaze Media, that is run by Glenn Beck, and she has a number of fingers and a number of pies, along with her husband Liam Donovan. Well, all of that is gone now. Her channel has been terminated, as well as Tenet Media, which she owned, and she's basically been yeeted off every relevant social media platform out there, and it's not unlikely that she might be facing jail time. Well, I mention this because very recently it's come to light that the United States Department of Justice has issued forth an indictment where the company Tenet Media, as well as some other corporations, have been found to have engaged in money laundering, having taken money from the Russian government. And although in the indictment neither Lauren Chen nor Liam Donovan are specifically cited by name, and no one as yet has been charged with a crime, it's pretty obvious, based on the indictment, if you look at it, that Lauren Chen and her husband are meant and implied. The evidence seems good for this, by the way, because I don't think the Department of Justice would issue forth an indictment if the evidence were flimsy and bad. But let's assume it's true. It seems like she's been on the Russian payroll for a good amount of time. And certain things have been talked about, such as the fact that she openly talked about transactions, wire transactions, on Discord, where she talks about time zones in Moscow and what have you. And basically the idea was receive money from the Russian state in order to supposedly influence the American election or the American political scene. It seems like Lauren Chen, her husband, were aware of this based on transcripts from Discord, as I mentioned. Again, I don't think the Department of Justice would be issuing forth this indictment if there were zero or even bad evidence for it. On top of that, there are other people who are involved, although not directly as Lauren Chen and her husband have been. Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, various political commentators, so-called, of the right wing. I say so-called because we're going to be talking about some of the effect related to this. I call this the Lur and Chant Effect, and we'll go into some great detail on that. But assuming what the United States Department of Justice is claiming, Lauren Chen and her husband are guilty of some very severe stuff. And the other people, who were not direct actors, purportedly didn't know the source and origin. The weird thing about this, for the record, is that some of these people were being paid $100,000 to make a single video that barely got 1,000 views. Even my videos do better than that. So we can see the incentive for them to hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and just take the money and shut up, basically. I'm not going to go into any more details on this. If you want all the details, there's plenty of stuff online, people talking about the nitty-gritty details of this. But what I find most interesting about this whole affair is that if you had to any degree followed these individuals, whether it's Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, or Romy Millennial, aka Lauren Chen, they all used to be super milquetoast, in some cases left-wing, in some cases a bit right of center in the case of Lauren Chen. And then sometime in the last roughly 3 to 4 years, they've done a complete 180, radically changing their positions on virtually everything they used to believe in. Like I said, if you're interested in some of Lauren Chen's posts, you can see it's definitely not right of center or conservative. It is basically far right, you could say. I'm not using it as a boo word, but rather as a descriptor. And Dave Rubin for years has claimed he's a libertarian now and some sort of conservative. And Tim Pool used to be left of center 10 years ago and an investigative journalist. But none of his talking points today resemble any of that even remotely. So it's not an unreasonable hypothesis to make to suggest that maybe they started changing their positions after they got on somebody's payroll, maybe Russia's payroll, maybe somebody else's. But it seems it's very possible, very probable that they were incentivized to change their positions on a lot of things based on financial compensation. This isn't in itself very novel, but if you look at the landscape of YouTube, it really begs the question. This is what I'm calling the Lauren Chen effect. What is the likelihood that people that used to be milquetoast, left of center, right of center, become far-right radicals? Again, I'm not using this term as a boo word, but rather as a descriptor. Well, it's certainly possible, but it's very unlikely. And so this does beg the question, how many political commentators out there are actually to be trusted in their words in the sense of, are they being authentic? Are they telling you what they really think? Now, setting aside things like the Overton window, which has shifted greatly if you see some of the stuff that Lauren Chen has posted, it strikes me as very plausible that many commentators, whether left or right, are compromised in some sense. Let's take an example from the left, supposedly the far left. Hassan Piker, the 6'4" Chad Light, who is a huge Twitch streamer. It's very clear if you pay attention to him that he has no authentic opinions of his own. He simply sniffs the air and then tries to figure out what's going on in terms of progressive politics and then just repeats these things ad nauseum, word for word. In other words, he doesn't think for himself, but the point is people are not presenting their authentic selves, or their authentic views more importantly. Although in the case of Hassan Piker, it's probably not related to a foreign government or taking money from some sort of illicit source, but it does drive home the point. Case in point, Tim Pool used to be quite neutral about Ukraine. He said something to the effect of the U.S. should just stay out of the Ukrainian affair. Then he made a recording at some point in time, very suspicious one, where he repeats that Ukraine is the enemy of the U.S. in an emphatic and passionate manner. It sounds like something he's reading off of a script. So it seems to me a lot of these bigwigs and these political commentators are not only not to be trusted, but more importantly, do they actually believe the things they're saying? You probably all know what audience capture is by now. It's a very real phenomenon where basically you say things to please your audience. Now, I like to think I generally don't do that myself. I have many videos where I get disapproval. For example, I'm a very big enthusiast and believer in the rock-solid evidence for evolution on this planet, but I have a lot of subscribers who think that's BS. They don't believe in evolution. They're religious. All sorts of things. And I talk about this stuff just as an example, and if I were captured by that audience, I would attempt to lend credence to the religious, non-evolutionary belief, but I don't, because I think it's BS and I don't think it's true. Again, just one example. But a lot of people have to kowtow very precisely to their audience's needs, for good reason, because if they don't, their views will drop. One of the reasons I think why I don't get a lot of views, especially these days, is my audience is a very mixed bag of different factions, different people believing different things. But I do know, for example, if I decided to take up gardening one day, and I talked about my tomato or cucumber garden, my views would plummet. Now, not because there's anything inherently wrong with talking about gardening or having a gardening channel. It's just when you deviate too far from your audience's interest, your channel suffers. This is just how YouTube works. And this extends far beyond the political sphere. You have people like Rollo Tomassi who will never, ever admit that they're wrong about anything. Because again, this is a feature of YouTube. Admitting you're wrong online is tantamount to annihilation. Admitting that you're flawed as a human being, and I'm a deeply flawed human being, is tantamount in most circles to annihilation. Instead, there's the expectation that comes from your audience, but also comes from the general momentum of social media, that you stick to your guns no matter what. You become the guy who's getting drenched in a horrendous downpour of rain, all the while claiming that it's sunny and it's not raining. Now, this has been this way for a long time by now. And I'm only talking about it right now because I think it's very topical in the context of Lauren Chen. Because the political stuff seems pretty obvious to me, that very few people are actually expounding upon their legitimate beliefs. But generally speaking, it makes sense, in the case of Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, and company, that their quote-unquote shift to the right probably was a consequence having been incentivized by audience capture, and in the case of these guys, directly being on the payroll of, allegedly, the state of Russia. It's a little bit murkier when it comes to non-political content, but what's annoying about human beings in general is most humans are reluctant to admit they're wrong, especially in the context of being in a debate or you're talking to somebody that you view inimically. The person is basically your enemy or your opponent. And in such moments, only status and clout count. The problem here is that what you end up with is that you can't trust anything anyone's saying in the sense of, do you know they authentically believe in the statements they're making? And there's almost no way, due to audience capture and money, to extract people's true beliefs. Now, sometimes you can parse these things, but generally speaking, it's very difficult. Because if you have a relatively big channel and it's going well because you make specific types of content, even without money laundering from a foreign state, you're still going to be incentivized to produce the same content again and again and again until it doesn't work anymore. So we're in this odd situation where the biggest, potentially most important actors out there in terms of social media are never in a position to actually speak their mind and tell you what they actually think about things, which basically takes away all the authenticity from the enterprise. Sure, you might argue that Lauren Chen and Tim Pool, for example, are just about entertainment, and in some sense that's true. People watch them because they're entertaining. They enjoy it on some level. There's even an argument to be made for, say, professional wrestling, right? Which we all know is fake, but people still enjoy it. They enjoy the acting, they enjoy the drama, the suspense. But these people are primarily proclaiming themselves to be serious political commentators. What is the actual value in terms of communicating messages and communicating their minds to people if they're not willing to say what they authentically think? And to my mind, there's not a lot of value there. Sure, monetarily, Lauren Chen was really raking it in. We know she's taking a lot of money. But at the end of the day, this is all just theater. Yes, there are things such as the Overton window. You can't say everything you think. But I think this Lauren Chen affair really drives home the point that pretty much all of YouTube is BS, and very few people, of course there are going to be some people, are giving you their authentic takes and are telling you what they really think about the world because they're too worried about audience capture, and in some cases they're literally on somebody's payroll. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. You guys are the best. Without you, this channel could not exist. And many special thanks to my donors on PayPal as well. And if you can engage in the usual YouTube jazz of liking the video, sharing the video, commenting, all that stuff would be much appreciated. Until the next time, if I'm still alive, I'll check you out then. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.